The cinema specialist Phil and John are back. I haven't said Phil and John. That's the first time. I just realized that as I said it. There you go. There's your really good, clean intro. The cinema specialist Phil and John are back. I should have just said the cinema specialists are back or just gotten away from it. Anyway, hopefully nobody listens to the first 20 seconds of this podcast for the remainder of time. We're here and we are talking about Spider-Man Far From Home and Saltburn. And I have to be honest, I am stoked to talk about Saltburn. John, I want to make sure I get this correct before I turn this over to you. Just because like, you know, this is important. This is important. People need to be held accountable for their actions. And you are one of those people. So here's John. So John, you watched this movie on December 22nd.
I did. Yeah.
And you did not tell me that I needed to immediately watch this movie because there might not be a movie more made for me than this that came out this year.
I mean,
what is wrong? What's up?
Our friend Steve has been telling you that for like weeks now, and you still didn't watch it. So
that is fair.
I'm not going to take all the blame here.
I don't do a podcast with Steve, though. I do a podcast with you. You're supposed to be my guy. You're supposed to help me out. I loved this movie so much. I still have the Holdovers at number one for the year because the Holdovers kind of hit me on a different level. But I love this movie so much. Oh my God, what a fun ride. And I just can't wait to dive into it. I don't want to spend too much time talking about how much I loved it because I got to talk about like all the great decisions that were made in this movie. I can't believe how polarizing this movie is. Why? Let me ask you this before we get into this movie. Why is this movie polarizing, but Poor Things isn't?
Because it's not about the quantity of sex in a movie. It's about what that sex is in a movie and how weird that sex is. Because we're finally entering a point, I think, in America. I mean, Canada too, to an extent, but North America in general, where I think we're getting to a point where people are more accepting of human beings as sexual beings in media, but they still don't really like weird sex things. They find it embarrassing and they don't want to talk about them.
Yeah. And I mean, okay. How do you say his last name? For the love of God, Barry.
It's just Kogan, isn't it?
Is it Kogan? Okay. The K-E-O-G thing really bothers me. But either way, so Barry in this movie is all about the weird sex. That is for sure. That's like his thing in this movie. And it keeps escalating and escalating and escalating. And like I kept waiting to get to the point where I was getting tired of it because I gave Poor Things 3.5 stars. And I talked about how like it was weird. I respected it. Watching this movie might have actually knocked Poor Things down to 3 stars for me.
Yeah.
It really might have, because this movie really capitalized on all of its opportunities. We are going to be pretty spoilery in this podcast. So if you are at this point, if you are tuned in at 3.5 minutes and you are listening and you don't know what this movie is, it is free on Amazon Prime right now. At least in the US. I don't know about like worldwide, but in the US, it is free. In Canada, it is free. You can go and just watch Saltburn on Amazon Prime. It is a hard R-rated movie. This is an R-rated movie, and it earned its R. There are fluids, there are graphic sexual moments, there is a lot of blood, but it's a beautiful movie. So like you've been warned that if that's not your thing, then don't watch this movie. But we're going to be a little spoilery. So if you haven't seen it, I really recommend you just go watch it instead of listening to us talk and then come back and listen to us talk about it. Because the midpoint of this movie is one of the best midpoints in a movie I have seen in years. Whoa. I am talking like a decade. I don't know. I'm trying to think of it because look, climax, yes. Ending, yes. There's always like you can think of some really good climaxes, some really good endings that are really good or really good openings. You know, you can think of those. What have I seen in recent years that is really good opening, even if it's not a new movie necessarily? But midpoints very rarely get talked about. One of the greatest midpoints in film history is the watch scene in Pulp Fiction. Because it lets you know that the time is all messed up. People are doing, that's an amazing midpoint scene. It's not necessarily a turning point, but it's a midpoint. People don't talk about midpoints. Although midpoints, if they're not done well, that's when a movie either falls apart or gets much better than what it was, depending on how it's handled. The midpoint in this movie blew me away. Like, blew me away to the point where I said, holy shit, this is not the movie I thought Emerald Fennell, who should be nominated for Best Writing and Best Directing instead of Greta Gerwig. I was like, holy shit, she is not making the movie I thought she was going to make. And I'm so impressed. I love you and thank you and good job. And I'm just like, my 4-star rating on this, like, I can't sit here and be like, this is the second movie I watched in the year 2024 is going to be one of my top 100 movies. But if I watch this movie again and it hits me as hard as it did the first time, I stayed up till like 1:30 yesterday in the morning. I could not fall asleep after watching this movie. Wow. I was so freaking amped. I loved it. All right, John, you can talk. Otherwise, this is going to be a really boring podcast.
Well, I think that I said it in my Letterboxd review. This is the biggest FU to the upper class since Rules of the Game.
Yeah.
Like, that's the level that we are comparing this film to. It's something like as iconic as the Rules of the Game. And it doesn't feel that way at first. And that's what makes it so good. Emerald Fennell has just done this fantastic job. We saw her debut with Promising Young Woman. We talked about it when it was like nominated for Oscars and stuff like that. That is nothing in comparison to this film. This film is beyond that so much. And it's subtle. It's weird. It's confusing a bit until you like really click it in. I've had so many conversations with people who have watched this movie and they're all over the spectrum. Some people have hated it. Some people just absolutely love it. It's something you really need to experience. And we don't have a lot of films like that come out nowadays.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, so if you go on Letterboxd, this actually has a lower rating than Promising Young Woman, which I think is shocking. And I think Promising Young Woman caught a lot of people by surprise, right? People weren't expecting that movie to be as good as it was. 2020 was maybe the worst year in film history. Like, and I mean that wholeheartedly. Yeah. And it's not because of it's not the movie's fault. It's just the fact that there weren't that many movies. So when you go look at the Best Picture nominees that year, the depth isn't there. It's just not as good. I mean, Nomadland ultimately ends up winning Best Picture. In my opinion, one of the worst Best Picture winners of all time. But even if you love Nomadland, Promising Young Woman wasn't your general, oh, this is a Best Picture nominee type movie. It's not what you expect. And what's funny with that movie, though, is it was seen as like this big, like, feminist conversation movie. Look what she's doing and you know, whatever. It doesn't matter. Saltburn is exactly what Hollywood doesn't like. And that is subtle in what it's actually telling you. Because this movie is very in your face. There's no denying that. This movie is insanely in your face. I mean, the bathtub scene, the surprise for Farley at night is very in your face. The vampire scene is very in your face. Just the fact that they're in this monster of a castle is in your face. It is so in your face. The nerd in this movie is the most stereotypical nerd you'll ever see in your life. But the subtlety is in what it is making you feel and how it is telling you to feel and the story it is telling. America Ferrera's speech in Barbie, which is for some reason garnering her an Oscar nomination and people are like using that as this moment in history. Oh my God. Like, it's the greatest speech ever written, which to me was one of the most cringeworthy moments in film in like the last 10 years, is everything this movie isn't. And the reason why America Ferrera's speech is getting so much notoriety is because it is so ridiculously on the nose. And so it's easy for the masses to understand. Saltburn is just sickening the entire time. And then when she pulls out at the midpoint, the wool over your eyes, I mean, I just never saw it coming. And all of a sudden I said, holy shit, this guy's a nut job. This guy is out of his mind.
Yeah, he is. And I mean, I think we're at a point where we really need to be talking about Barry Coogan as perhaps one of the most underrated actors of the last 10 years.
I hope, and here's my concern. This movie did not make much money.
No.
Does that screw him on his upward trajectory? Because this is 2 phenomenal performances in a row. I mean, his role in Banshees was incredible. Arguably robbed of an Oscar. I mean, Ke Kwan was great, but Barry Keoghan and Brendan Gleeson, in my opinion, were both better. Banshees was my favorite movie of last year, so that doesn't help. But I mean, he was phenomenal in this movie. You feel bad for him.
Yeah.
You feel so bad for him, and he's so good at playing pathetic. But then as he starts to take control, I mean, this dude's got to be getting roles as a villain in a supporting role coming up. Like, he has to be. I'm talking like Anton Chigurh levels of villainy that I need in coming years from Barry.
Yeah, and he's fully capable of doing it too. Like, he has proved it. I mean, he already kind of has that though, right? Like, I mean, you haven't seen it, Phil, but his performance in The Killing of the Sacred Deer is so unsettling, and it is just it's very similar to the way he presents in this, where at first, like, he gets all this sympathy from you. You feel like you should be sympathetic towards that character, and then you see the genius behind the character itself, and he is terrifying. The way that Barry Keoghan can just move his face to show this duality between him as this like meek character who needs to be coddled and supported, and this evil mastermind is phenomenal.
Yeah, you know what it is like. So I think about the part in this movie. So you see the setup, you see what's happening, you get like the subtle like homosexual tendencies, and then you're getting the fact though that he's definitely more bisexual than anything. But by the end of this movie, I don't think he's anything. I think he's just a sociopath who would have done whatever the hell he needed. But you see the setup and you see where it's going, and based on the trailer too, I'm saying to myself, okay, it's going to be the rich people picking on the poor kid, and we're going to see the disgust, like how disgusting rich people are, and like I know like the big popular phrase nowadays is "eat the rich." Like, I'm not one of those people who's running around going, eat the rich, eat the rich, eat the rich. And that's what I think impressed me the most about this movie. I'm not somebody who will just like a movie because of what the messaging behind a movie is. I don't care. I mean, you could go against every single belief I've ever had while making a movie, and if it's made well and it makes me feel something, I'm going to like it. Like, that's the insane. Like, that's maybe just me. Maybe a lot of people can't get there, but that's where like this is such a message that I feel like is really being hammered in the world right now. And it's like I don't pay that much attention to this kind of stuff. So for me, it was, can they pull this off and not feel preachy? And so the runny egg scene, I'm like, oh my God, like these people are such monsters that this poor guy gets an upset stomach from runny eggs. Now they're going to be mean to him. And then you get them at the part, like before the party, but you start to see how Farley is treating him and everything like that. And I'm just sitting there and I'm saying to myself, man, like this is whatever, here's the typical bad story, whatever. And that's why though, this midpoint, when we meet, and again, if you have not seen this movie, I'm telling you, we're going to be a little spoilery.
They're coming. They're coming. The spoilers are coming. It's inevitable. We have to talk about them.
When you meet his mother and you meet his father, and you realize, like, at that point you say, oh my God, I feel bad for Jacob Elordi. I feel terrible for him. He's being used by this scumbag. Like, this guy is a terrible human being. Like, fuck this guy. I mean, that's what's going through my head, right? But then at the party, they're so mean. I can't even remember happy birthday to you. I can't even remember his name. And then everything starts to pay off.
Yep.
And by the end of this movie, oh my God, I could have ran through a wall. Like, I could have ran through a wall. And it was because of the midpoint. If that movie starts going the direction, because I'm sitting there saying to myself a lot of this movie going, where is this going? I'm really liking it, but where is it going? Where is it going? Where is it going? And then, he called the mom, and I said, oh, here we go. He's going to go to the house. And here we go. That's where like the real problems are going to happen. And Emerald Fennell went the exact opposite way. And I'm telling you, The Holdovers, is The Holdovers based on a book?
I
Oh,
don't think
just hit
so. I
my
thought it was an
microphone.
original
Sorry,
script.
everybody. I don't know. So I don't know what's up for adapted screenplay and God, Jordan Alford took the night off. This is where I need him very badly because he would just jump in and know. All right, hang on. Let me look. Adapted screenplay. Oh, original screenplay. The Holdovers is original. Okay.
Yeah.
So The Holdovers is original and Saltburn is also original, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. It's crazy to me that Saltburn is not in the discussion for best screenplay because the screenwriting in this movie is out of control.
It is. It's phenomenal, and it is. But again, it's the subtlety of it. It's almost too intellectual for some people, and like that sounds like super elitist to say, but it's really interesting. Like I said, those conversations I was having with people about whether they liked it, whether they disliked it. I mentioned things like the fact when he threw the stone with his dad's name on it, it didn't land in the river. Right? Yeah. And that is foreshadowing the fact that his father isn't dead, and you don't even think about it. And then you get that reveal, and you're like, oh my God.
Another pathetic thing he can't throw.
Yeah, and it's just like, oh my God, this is actually genius filmmaking and a script that is so tight that they are revealing things to you at the beginning of this movie, and you would never even expect that to be a thing.
Yep. Oh, man, and the one that really got me where you really start to figure out just how messed up this guy is when they throw the stone in for Venetia and the stone for Felix isn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just tremendous. It's just tremendous. Yeah. I mean, God, it's just like, I get that it's too much for people. It's not going to get a Best Picture nomination. It's not. No. It's too polarizing. No. And right now you're talking Oppenheimer, Killers of the Flower Moon, Barbie, Poor Things, The Holdovers, American Fiction, Maestro, Past Lives, and then you're going to get something like Anatomy of a Fall, The Zone of Interest, maybe May, December. I don't think The Color Purple will get in there. I know you didn't like that. Spider-Man Across the Universe might get in there. So like I get it. But this to me this has this feeling, right? This came out in 2024. So we're or 2023. So we're talking a little bit still in the first half of this decade. But I remember what really started to get me into film. Peter Travers. I don't know how many people ever read Peter Travers. I don't know how many people read reviews anymore, honestly. Probably not many. But Peter Travers did his top 10 of the 2000s. And I remember he put Mulholland Drive, I believe it was at number 1. And I hadn't seen Mulholland Drive at that time. I saw, or maybe I had seen Mulholland Drive, but I wasn't really like, I was like, yeah, okay, dude. What, like, it hadn't really clicked in my head, or maybe I hadn't seen, I forget exactly what it was. But that was when I started to realize that, like, Mulholland Drive is the movie people are talking about. Mulholland Drive, after all of this, after a whole decade, Mulholland Drive is the one that's coming up. Saltburn has that power. No matter what wins Best Picture. Because I'll tell you what, Coda is already out of everybody's mind. Nomadland might as well not exist. I mean, those two movies, they might as well not exist. Everything Everywhere All at Once, that will stand the test of time, at least for a decade. And then maybe people will get tired of something like that. But like Coda and Nomadland are just, in my opinion, it's okay, great. That was nice. Saltburn has the potential to be that movie that all of a sudden at the end of a decade, as people start to revisit it, they say, man, that was so much better than I remember, especially as we pull ourselves away from the hype around Barbie, the hype around Oppenheimer, the hype around all these other movies, as we start to pull ourselves out of the post-COVID world and we start to like reestablish, this might be the movie that best captures kind of the political feelings and the just like the worldly feelings of a lot of the population right now.
Yeah, I think it's a very timely movie, and not in the sense that it's like really capturing the era, but that it is so entrenched with the political views of the era and the commentary of the era that I think no matter your political standing, you watch this movie and you might get different things out of it, but you're kind of forced to look at the other side while you're watching it.
Yeah, because she's not being, and I know in Promising Young Woman, there was that one twist. I think it was with, what is it, Bo Burnham or something, where like, he's not who he says he is or whatever it is. And so like Emerald Fennell is good at doing this. Let's be real. But because she is setting you up to really feel bad for the poor guy. And then by the end of it, part of you is like, okay, yes, I understand the absurdity of like generational wealth in this type of system where these people are just being born into castles where nothing except their name helped them earn that. And now they're getting all the ease that they want in life at Oxford, while here's poor Barry working his ass off, doing everything he can. But by the end of it, you say, man, is that really the result that everybody wants? Is the result that you really do want an entire family wiped out by a psychopath? I mean, this guy's a psycho.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, maybe some people watched that and said, hell yeah. I mean, I will say after the movie ended, I was saying, hell yeah. I'm not saying that I loved Barry as a person by the end of this movie, but man, I was just so into this movie that I couldn't believe that that's where it went.
Yeah. It's funny because I think what we're really talking about now is that whole essence that Emerald Fennell puts into the film of this idea of like, did Ollie, Barry Coogan's character, love or hate Felix? And it's that interlaced discussion that we have the entire time that we feel is a like, a police interview or something like that that's going on. Like you kind of get this sense from the very beginning of this movie that Felix is going to die at some point, and like what's going to cause it? Is it because Ollie is too obsessive with him or what? And then you realize that like his hate is manifesting his love and it's working together. And then you realize you're kind of been like Kaiser Sose the entire movie.
Yeah.
Which is saying something to compare this twist to one of the most notorious twists of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and like, I mean, right off the bat, right, we hear him say, did I love him? And like the way he's done up and everything, you're like, okay, he's talking about somebody who's dead. Everybody loved him. Not everybody loves him. It was everybody loved him. So you're getting the idea of, okay, something's up. This guy died. We know it's going to be Felix, but you're thinking, is there an accident? Is something going to happen? Especially because of the way it's set up early on. It can't like, what's going to happen? Like, did this unrequited love lead to death? Who knows? And I do think he loved him. I do. He says it about 25 times in the movie. I do think he loved him.
Well, I mean, I don't think you get the bathtub scene without him loving him.
Exactly. And I don't think you get the grave scene without him loving him.
No.
However, I think the conflict from within Oliver Quick was he loved him, but he still felt disrespected, and still at the end of the day, he wanted everything that guy had. He did. And he couldn't fully be in love with him because he could not get behind the fact that Felix did nothing and was set for life. He just couldn't get behind it. Oh, like, man.
So much so that he's willing to stick this out for 15 years. To finally get what he wants.
Yep.
And we can tell the time because there is media that dates this movie at the very beginning of it.
Yep. Because
it's a great use. In fact, it's a great use of media. It does take place in 2006, right? Superbad came out after that, so that was a little weird. But
yeah, Superbad was 2008, wasn't it?
Sure was, yeah.
2007. But like so that makes sense. That was the summer of 2007.
Yeah. And like, if you listen to the music that's being played and stuff in this movie, like you really get an idea of exactly when this is taking place. And then you get that time skip at the end of the movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I mean, it's crazy. And the fact that they end this with murder on the dance floor.
Yeah.
While he's dancing around the house naked. So for anybody who isn't familiar with, I had never heard Murder on the Dance Floor, but I'll tell you what, it might make my top 100 next year because that scene just makes that song. But it has a writing credit with Greg Alexander. John, do you know who Greg Alexander is? You might not even know anything about him.
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay, so Greg Alexander has been nominated for Oscars. He did Begin Again and all of that. But Greg Alexander was the main guy in New Radicals who did the song "You Get What You Give,"
okay, yeah,
which was a massive one-hit wonder back in like 1998, I think it was. And if you listen to New Radicals, that album, Maybe You've Been Brainwashed Too, there is not a bad song on it. It is nothing but phenomenal songs. Yeah, that album's incredible. But he gets classified as a one-hit wonder because You Get What You Give was the only hit. And then he broke up. He got rid of New Radicals, but he kept writing music and doing stuff. And this is the type of stuff he wrote. He was nominated for Begin Again with Keira Knightley and Mark Ruffalo. But this is the type of stuff he writes. Right. So to end it with Murder on the Dance Floor and just have like this massive song. I mean, it's just incredible. And have him dancing around naked is just perfect. So yeah, I mean, here's how I'll look at this. Barry Keoghan, I think, is the best performance of the year from a male. Wow. Rosamund Pike should win Best Supporting Actress. Won't even be nominated. I think she's better than was it Devon Randolph Joy? Devon Joy Randolph?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But she's better than her. I think that Richard E. Grant not being even in the discussion is criminal. Richard E. Grant is incredible in this movie as the father. He is perfection. I loved him. They all should be in it. And you know what? The Holdovers should win Best Screenplay. Saltburn should be right behind it. And Emerald Fennell should be getting the credit that Greta Gerwig is getting. It's not even close. Greta Gerwig just did what the mainstream thing is. And look, I like Greta Gerwig. I really do. I got the 20th Century A24 book. What a purchase that was for whoever got it for me for Christmas. I love it. I like Frances Ha. I like Little Women. I love Lady Bird. Like, she earned her place, but she's sold out at this point. She's sold out. Barbie is not as deep as people think Barbie is. And that's just a fact. And great, she's going to get all the notoriety because it made a whole bunch of money and they want to reward it and everything. If you put a female in the role of Barry Keoghan, I honestly think this movie's getting Best Picture nominations. I honestly believe that. I really do. I really do.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
I really do. Because I think it almost misses the point of, by having a male play that role, it goes against what Emerald Fennell did with Promising Young Woman. If they would have done the same character as Carey Mulligan, I think that this is getting nominated for Best Picture without a doubt.
Interesting. I don't know. It's possible. It's very possible because then it becomes this like interesting. But I almost think you need the male character in order to hit home with the themes that you're going with this movie, right?
Yeah.
Because I think you're so focused on wealth disparity and like the differences between the upper and lower classes in this movie that having a female lead there almost detracts from it because people will focus more on the fact and like, this is not saying that it's a bad thing, but people will focus more on the fact that the character is a woman than a low income person who is like, what do they call him? A scholarship kid at one point?
A scholarship kid, yeah. He's a scholarship kid.
Like that's the point of the movie. And I don't know. It's a good question. Does it get the nom? We don't live in that world. Instead, we live in a world where we actually got this movie.
And we got the right movie.
Yeah.
I think it's the right movie. I think it's the right decisions. I just think we talk about it a lot when we talk about these Marvel movies. Sometimes, like, who they throw up, they're throwing up to be like, oh, look, we have a female director directing a Marvel movie. Yeah. Oh, look, we have this. It's almost like Emerald Fennell like betrayed trust by not following up Promising Young Woman with another strong female-led movie. And I think this is infinitely better than Promising Young Woman. I mean, honestly, this is a powerhouse of a movie. This is incredible direction, incredible writing, incredible acting. I mean, how do you feel about that? We don't have that much more time, but also we can talk about this movie longer than we can talk about Spider-Man Far From Home because this movie's a banger and Spider-Man Far From Home isn't. What are your opinion on like all those Oscar noms and stuff I was talking about? Like, did you feel the same way? I mean, obviously, supporting actor is loaded this year, but how do you feel about the performances and everything in this movie?
I mean, I already said it. Barry Keoghan is just the most underrated actor we have right now at this point. His performances are just so solid over and over again, and the fact that there's not even talk of him being nominated is ridiculous. Rosamund Pike, her performance is a lot more subtle, which I mean, I guess the Academy likes that sometimes. But it's so strong, and you're just like, you're bought into everything she is giving on in the screen, right? Like every single thing she does just feels like, yes, this is exactly what this character is. You almost forget you're watching Rosamund Pike, who is actually just such a recognizable face at this point.
Yeah, yeah. I also appreciated that she was talking about Pulp at one point and how she was dating Jarvis. That made me laugh really hard. They thought Common People was about her. That made me happy. I'm just surprised that. Go ahead.
So I was going to say, how about the fact that Farley is the same guy who was in Gran Turismo?
Dude, okay, that's why I recognized him. Yeah, and that just proves how bad the Gran Turismo script was. My God.
Yeah. Because he acts in this movie, and you can like feel what he's doing. Yeah.
Yeah, he's great in this. No, and like that's what, like, Rosamund Pike is kind of an Oscar darling. She's kind of a she's kind of like a people really like her. So she did end up getting a supporting actress role, a nomination for Golden Globes. I don't know if that will hold out, but she did get the nomination. Now, granted, there were 6 nominations for the Globes this year. I don't know why they went from 5 to 6, but Davine Joy Randolph, if she wins, I'm totally fine with that. I mean, she's absolutely phenomenal. I just hope Rosamund Pike gets nomination at this point. She's perfect in this movie. She is so good. So good.
It's just like there's all these little moments of Rosamund Pike in this movie where she's talking about poor Pamela, right? Poor, sad Pamela, which I think is actually the credited name.
That is Poor Dear Pamela.
Place.
What it is.
Yeah. And you see the care, and then you see that, you know, that moment where she's like sitting outside and Ollie comes up and asks where Pamela is, and she's like, yeah, you know what, her stay got a little long. And it's just like, whoa.
Yeah.
That's why there's this malice towards this upper class in this film. It's because of moments like this where they put on the front, but they're still just people and they get irritated just like the rest of us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you know, they try to pretend like they're hospitable, but in reality, they could give 2 shits that you're there. They want you out. Yeah. All right, you have anything else you want to say about this movie? We should probably move on, even if it breaks my heart too.
Barry Coogan's penis is the best Chekhov's gun we have gotten in a movie in a long time.
since Boogie Nights.
Yeah, well, because like exactly, since Boogie Nights, right? Because there's the scene in the meadow where like, oh, that's a surprise, and it's like, you're not even going to show us, and then we actually get it, and it's like, felt really satisfying.
Yeah, it did. It did. Good for Barry Keoghan, man. Way to go. Okay. So today, before we jump into our next movie, today was actually a big day for us. Our first $5 Tuesday. Mean Girls dropped on the Patreon. So if you want to be a patron, patreon.com/thespecialist. It's right there at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, it's hard to miss. I'm running my mouse over it right now. It's right here. If you're listening, patreon.com/thespecialist. $5 Tuesday is a new weekly show that is is available for patrons, where John and I are discussing a movie, kind of similar to how we discussed it here, but because we're discussing movies that are a little bit older, celebrating huge anniversaries this year, we talk about kind of their cultural impact and how they've aged and you know, all of that fun stuff. So we did for our first one, Mean Girls, which is 20 years old this year, and also has a movie coming out on January 12th. So if you want to become a patron, patreon.com/thespecialist. That's for our $5 tier. So consider getting involved there. Once these Oscar nominations come out in 3 weeks, we will also be doing a Best Picture breakdown, but that's for $10 patrons. Obviously, that would be kind of like a month thing. So you could just up yourself for a month so you can get all the Best Picture stuff right before the Oscars, and then you can drop back down to $5. If you're just a movie person, if you're a Survivor person too, you should want to go over there and check out that stuff. The Mean Girls episode will drop on YouTube next week. So if you're not completely sold right now, you can wait, see what it's like on Tuesday. And also next Tuesday, we'll also have had our second episode drop, which is The Terminator, right? Was The Terminator second?
No, it's The Mummy.
The Mummy was second. The Terminator was third. So I'm getting ahead of myself. But yes, The Mummy will be dropping next week for the patrons. So if you're into those movies, if you haven't seen them in a while, if you just want to hear me and John continue to talk about movies, become a patron, patreon.com/thespecialist. You know, I'm never going to be the guy who says, "Oh, it's barely." I understand that it's money. Otherwise, I wouldn't be saying, "Hey, go become a patron." But we're really putting the effort and the work in over there, and we really hope that you guys are appreciative of it. And it's a great way to help kind of make it so that we can keep doing these podcasts all the time because we love doing it. But it's obviously neither of our main gigs. Although I'm going to fight like hell until it is. So
yeah,
that's it. Patreon.com/the specialists. Go listen to us talk about Mean Girls and join the Discord, because the Discord, you can now have a conversation about Mean Girls. Who would have thought? John, I can't believe you didn't respond to Alex Trias yet. I can't respond because I was at trivia hosting a trivia, but he said, I can't believe Mean Girls is 20 years old already. And you didn't respond. We finally are having movie conversation.
I'm sorry. I'll get to it. I'll get to it. Don't worry. It's coming. I just had to process exactly how I wanted to respond to that. It just made me feel really old.
Yeah, it's brutal. Speaking of things that make me feel really old, Marissa Tomei has aged so good. It's crazy. Spider-Man Far From Home. Here we are. Okay. Is it fair? Let me start with this question, and I'll let you decide. You can answer it. Is it fair to drop a movie a full half star because of a scene that happens after the credits?
I'm assuming you're talking about the second one and not the first one.
I just want to know, is it fair?
No.
Well, I dropped this movie a half star because of the scene after the credits.
It was the second one after the credits, right?
It's horrible. Why is it there? Why is it there?
Okay, why it's there, I don't know if I can justify it. But I do think it enhances this movie, and I'll get into it when we get to it. But this one surprised me, Phil, because I've kind of been low on this one for a while. This is one of we're getting to a few of the MCU movies I've watched and rated on Letterboxd previously now, because I rewatched all the Spider-Man movies when the last one came out and everything. I gave this a 2-star the last time I watched it, and I was like, this is a 3-star. Like, this is a solid MCU movie. And maybe it's just because, what we've watched recently, or maybe it's just because, we've been doing this for so long now and we just keep going all over and over again. This just felt like a breath of fresh air for the MCU again.
Yeah. So here's how I felt about this one. I was very entertained pretty much the whole time. And what I really appreciate about this movie was how quick it jumped around between all the things that were going on. So this actually will be my number 8. I'll put it above Ant-Man. This will be my number 8. Because it was close to a 3-star. There were a couple things here that dropped it from 3 stars because I was entertained for most of the movie. I actually like Zendaya, and I know Zendaya and Tom Holland are dating in real life, right? I don't keep up on the celeb gossip, but they're dating in real life.
They were at some point. I don't know if they still are, but they were at some point.
Yeah, they were at some point. I don't know. Somebody in the chat. I mean, this is where if my wife was listening, she'd jump in and be like, "No, you idiot," or "Yes, of course." But the thing is, they have great chemistry. And that really elevates this movie because I'm not used to seeing great chemistry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, here's my big knocks on this movie.
Okay.
Number 1, they're asking a lot of you in terms of your willing suspension of disbelief when it comes to the illusion of this movie.
Phil.
Yeah.
We just watched a movie where they went back in time and they broke all the time travel movies. Asking us to believe about a projector doesn't seem that far-fetched.
Well, and also, though, John, that movie where they went back in time and they asked us to believe all that stuff got exactly 2 stars for me. So
I know.
Yeah. But like for me, it was kind of like I enjoyed it, but it was hard for me to wrap my mind around like, wait, that's a little extreme. And like the stuff that they're flying into that is real, why is it not actually being impacted? And like all those little nitpicky things.
Yeah.
So again, that drops us down. That drops it down to like 3 stars pretty much for me. Or let's say instead of being 4 stars, it goes down to 3.5 because of that. Second, so we just talked about Saltburn, and I'm telling you, man, every line of dialogue in that movie had me ready to I was like, oh my God, what are they going to respond to? How are they going to say this? What's going to happen? What I have really noticed now that we've watched 23 of these,
Oh my God.
23. What I've really noticed with this is the action sequences are all the same. And
Yes.
no matter how much fun they try to be or anything, I start dozing during the action. My internet totally cut out. Okay, hold on.
Okay.
Am I here now?
That was you, though, not me. So that's okay.
That was me. That was me. What was the last thing you heard from me?
Dozing.
Okay, I start dozing. Okay, cool. So you didn't really actually miss much. I can't stay awake during the fight scenes because once that sound starts happening and the flashing lights, I don't know what it is, but it's like hypnosis for me. And I was talking about this with some people, and I was saying what kind of shocks me with these Marvel movies is like when the Lord of the Rings movies are coming out, what is the defining moment of Amon Hen? What would you say?
The defining moment?
Yeah, like what's the defining moment of Amon Hen? Or name like a memorable moment of Amon Hen.
Amon Hen is the end of Fellowship, right?
Oh, do you not know that? Oh, yeah. So I play the video games, and it's always labeled Amon Hen. So when you play that,
it's just been a while.
Yeah.
It's what Boromir's sacrifice, Frodo putting the ring on, running away, like Frodo Sam going off across the river.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So so that's one. Okay, what's the big moment in the Mines of Moria?
It's the Bridge of Khazad-dûm.
Okay. What is the moment that everybody remembers from the Battle of Helm's Deep?
Is it Theoden as the rain starts pouring on his face? No, it's Gandalf coming over the hill, obviously.
Gandalf coming over the hill, but think smaller in terms of, there's a reason I'm doing this. Think smaller in terms of Lord of the Rings. Like, what is the cool thing that happens at Helm's Deep that everybody always remembers, and you probably tried to do it in your house at one point?
Oh, is it Legolas on the shield on the stairs?
Legolas on the shield on the stairs, shooting arrows and then stabbing the guy with the thing, pulling out his knife and stabbing the guy behind him. Yeah. Okay. And then when you get into Return of the King, it's a little bit harder to find them, but they have the battle in the field where they go up the elephant and he slides down and he lands in front of Gimli and he says that still counts as one. And like that's an epic moment. What I've noticed with these movies is these Marvel Cinematic Universe, and great, I'm comparing it to Lord of the Rings, which are the greatest action adventure movies ever made. So maybe that's a little unfair. There's nothing unique about the fights. Ant-Man has a very unique final battle. Very unique. That's the only one I can think of. Spider-Man gets in this fight, and it's the same beats every time. It's the super over-choreographed fight sequence where everybody is doing their hoo-ha, hoo-has, and that's it. That's the whole entire thing. It's flashing lights. It's buildings crumbling. It's cars being thrown. It's I'm going to save the day doing this. Yes, this has the cool added element of the projectors. But in terms of actual fighting that is going on, there is nothing different about what Spider-Man does in this movie than he does in any other movie or any Marvel hero does when they're fighting.
Yeah.
They're not elevating the game when they do these sequences. Instead, they're happening because they have to happen. And I understand in these kinds of movies, they have to happen. They have to. And I'm not going to knock this movie for that. But do it in a unique and exciting way. Why is it the same exact thing every time? So that drops at a half star. And then the fact that Green Ball's face comes back into the movie, just, I mean, that could have dropped it down to 1.5 stars, and I wouldn't feel guilty about it.
Oh, you're talking about the Skrulls. I couldn't remember who Green Ball's face was.
I'm sorry, because this movie's already been about Saltburn. Yes, the Scrotums. That is who I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay, like I get that. I've grown to appreciate the Skrull reveal at the end of this movie a lot more on repeat watches because you pay more attention to the way Samuel L. Jackson is playing Nick Fury, who's actually not Nick Fury, and is someone pretending to be Nick Fury. So you have Samuel L. Jackson acting as Samuel L. Jackson, and he does a really phenomenal job at it because it feels off. Nick Fury feels off in this movie. Maria Hill feels off in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And you get this reveal at the end. And it's like, that's why they felt off. I understand that. What's the point of it? I don't know. It hasn't really come to fruition. However, it makes me really appreciate what Samuel L. Jackson and Colby Smulders are doing in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot more.
Yeah.
And it explains how they get duped, right? Because Nick Fury shouldn't be duped by this story. No matter what's going on. When has Nick Fury ever not been super skeptical about everything that's been happening around him?
That's a good point. That is a good, and they even say at one point in this, like, he's the most skeptical guy I've ever met, and we've convinced him.
Yeah. Like even the bad guys know that this is too easy. But no one can make that connection because no one knows shape-shifting aliens exist.
But I guess what my big problem is then, like, why would Nick Fury stay on vacation as the entire world is falling apart? You know,
he's
like,
not
why
on
wouldn't
vacation. He's on a space station, like doing space stuff.
Yeah. Boo.
Eventually, we see him on that space station. I promise.
Yeah, I mean, look, I get it. I really do. Like, honestly, you've convinced me a little bit on that. I just hate the Skrulls. I hate their design.
I know you do.
Look, I love Ben Mendelsohn, and that's what bothers me. I think they're too goofy. J. Jonah Jameson, however, let's go. Ooh. I'm all in for that. Why is he not so much more prominent in these movies? Although that was a phenomenal reveal at the end there. I mean, that's just the best right there.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what everyone's been clamoring for since the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans. Everyone talks about J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson as one of the all-time best castings in comic book movie history. So to finally have him back on our screen in this new, InfoWars type role that makes more sense for the time of this film, like, it's the adaptation of this character to today's world, and it's fantastic to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is the second time he appears, because he does appear at the end of Homecoming.
Does he?
Yeah, he appears at the very end of one of them, because I even made reference to it in this podcast where I was like, I'm just happy that he showed up.
Oh, I didn't remember that. But
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's at the end of Homecoming. But
yeah, I mean, these are the end credits. We should probably talk about the rest of this, because there's a lot in this that I actually really enjoyed. And a lot of it stems from... Now, a lot of this stems from me not thinking of this as the final movie in Phase 3 and of the first movie of Phase 4. I think it works much better as the start of a new phase than the end of the previous phase. And I understand the decision to make this the end of the phase. You're kind of like capping off this whole Iron Man story that you started with, Peter. But what I really appreciated with this, and the way that Tom Holland performs it, we finally get Peter Parker and Spider-Man in this movie, which we didn't really get in Homecoming.
Yeah. I agree with that. I do agree with that.
Like, we get this moment of him becoming his own. And yes, it's kind of overshadowed by this legacy of Iron Man that Peter's trying to live up to and everything, this legacy of Tony. But I think it's perfectly encapsulated in this moment when, after Happy's picked him up in the Netherlands and they're on the plane and he starts making the suit, and Happy just like Jon Favreau looks at him and gives that like little smirk. And it's not a smirk of, you remind me of Tony. It's this is why Tony chose you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I did appreciate those little moments, and that's why, like, this is closer to a 3 than a 2 for sure. I mean, it's right on the cusp of being a 3-star movie. I had rewatched it, or I had watched it before you had rewatched it. So when I saw your review of 2, I was honestly a little surprised. I was like, oh, here comes John, just coming to be negative Nancy again. But it's a fun movie. It is a fun movie, and maybe I'm being too hard on it, and maybe it really is a movie that I should have just given the extra half star and just sucked it up and admitted that it's pretty good. I have it as the highest ranked of the Spider-Man movies thus far. I mean, I know there's only...
Me too. I have it at it's number 7 in my MCU rankings right now. So I have it in the same area as you do.
But I higher than Spider-Man. Homecoming is definitely closer to 2. Yeah, I just think they did a good job for the most part with the characters. I mean, the characters are really what the best part of this movie
Yeah.
is, and it feels believable. And like even like the Betty Brant and the sidekick guy, like that's fun to watch. Jake Gyllenhaal is a great villain. He's always a great villain,
Yeah.
but he's a great villain. I like the teachers, JB Smoove as one of them. I like that they're in over their head. I like that this takes place in Europe, so it's more isolated. It's a fun movie. It really is. And I don't know. Like Spider-Man, Ant-Man, Captain America. So far, those are the only characters in this universe that I really care about. I like Guardians of the Galaxy, but Guardians of the Galaxy is so like tertiary to everything else going on that I don't really care. A tangential, thank you. That's the word. I knew it was a T word. It's so tangential to everything that's going on. It just doesn't matter to me. But like when a Spider-Man movie comes up, I get pumped for that. And I was into this movie, but I can't give this movie more than 3 stars when I'm dozing through 25 minutes of nonsensical fight scenes because they're just going through the motions at this point. They're not trying to elevate the game.
And that's the biggest problem we kind of have with the MCU at this point is it's this idea of the repeated, we're about to enter phase 4 where we really have a third act problem in the MCU. And I think it really, like you said, it's just all of these fights are the same. How is the fight with the water elemental different than the fire elemental in this?
Yeah, they're not.
Right? Like, it's the exact same thing. Yes, like the last fight's slightly different because Peter knows what he needs to do. I think the better like action sequence in this is the whole, and it's really funny to say this because we shit on the CGI and MCU movies so much. It has almost never been used better than in this like Mysterio confusing segment that happens in Berlin.
Totally agree. It looks so clean. It is so clean looking. I was very impressed with that. I totally agree with you.
And it's so weird. And I even noticed, even like through these action sequences, it didn't feel as much like this is a soundstage in front of a green screen. It felt like there were actual sets being used in this movie, which is something
what's funny because he's actually creating all of this on a soundstage. So why does it look so much better than other stuff?
I don't know. Maybe they just like took it to heart. Maybe I bet Disney put a lot more effort into this movie because they were scared of what would happen after Endgame.
That's true.
They needed this movie to look good, to feel good. And it's just where we're at. And the fact that we get
this was the highest grossing, right? This was the movie worldwide that did the best, right?
No, it was the one that came after this, the Spider-Man after this. I'm pretty sure.
What was the Spider-Man after this? Oh, No Way Home.
No Way Home.
Yeah.
It's weird because they all have stupid home names. But
yeah, it makes them impossible to differentiate.
Yes.
Let me say Spider-Man No Way Home. I'm gonna Google that. Yeah, that one made
as you were saying,
$1.9 billion worldwide.
Yeah,
that's a lot of money. And Far From Home made $1.1 billion. So still not shabby, but No Way Home was the big, like, we're back, baby. And especially after
800 million is still a very large difference.
Yeah. I mean, this was we're back from COVID. We're back from COVID. So this is what we do.
But you talked about the Ned and Betty relationship. It's the perfect comedic relief for this movie, which is funny. It's weird. Also, Angouria Rice, who plays Betty Brant, is playing Katie Heron in the upcoming Mean Girls movie that releases next week. And I'm kind of excited because she plays this role in such a straight and narrow way, and it's that the juxtaposition between the two characters that makes this summer fling work so well and is so entertaining watching, because it's so high school, right? To be like completely into this person after a 9-hour plane ride.
Yeah, strictly because you shared space with them.
Yeah, it's so high school. And again, that's kind of what Homecoming was missing. Despite the fact that it's set in high school, it didn't feel like a high school movie. Whereas this really captured the essence of Peter Parker in high school, despite the fact that he's in Europe and it's the summer vacation.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It had actual high school relationships, and you had teachers, and you had things going on, rather than just, yeah, sure, you can blow that off. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. I will say, there is one thing that kind of bugs me about this movie as our, like, first post-blip movie. We don't really explore the feelings of people who got blipped versus people who didn't get blipped.
Yeah, it's kind of just like, oh, they're back and they're the same age. Well, everybody else is 5 years older, and that's really it. That's really it.
Because here's this explanation.
Determined how it would end.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I have to go watch the final episode of The Leftovers. Thanks, John.
Well, that's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. It's just, that's what I now have to do with my time moving forward.
Yeah.
Jason Obermeyer said at the end, I'll ask my 3 big questions I've been saving. Throw them in. Let's go. You got like 4 minutes. Throw them on in. We're sitting here. I'm waiting. John, we didn't talk about what movie we're going to do next week. Obviously, it's Black Widow.
No, we didn't.
We did not talk about what movie we're going to do next week. And my theater is not telling me. Okay, so I'm not being told what to expect on Friday. I know Night Swim will still be playing. Well, that's new this weekend. The Color Purple, Ferrari, Boys in the Boat. I have Migration, The Iron Claw, Aquaman 2, Anyone But You, Wish at 11:20 a.m. on Thursday. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, or we could just do a movie that's on.
I don't know.
We always said we were going to do The Killer. Is that still something worth doing?
We did. We should probably do that, right?
Let's just do the.
Oh no, I think Phil froze again.
Killer. We haven't done The Killer.
Yeah.
I gotta clear my cookies again. Yeah, I gotta clear my. I don't know what's going on with my computer. It's just.
Okay.
It was working so
we
well.
Agree on The Killer, right?
Yeah, we agree on The Killer. We'll do The Killer.
Okay.
All right. What are your thoughts on the MCU? Pros and cons, both itself in relation to Hollywood and the entertainment industry. John, you have like 3 minutes to answer these questions. So don't.
These are okay. Obviously, the MCU kind of brought around a resurgence of the summer blockbuster. I think that's a pro and a negative. I think the summer blockbuster kind of had this vacuum after the Star Wars prequel trilogy ended.
Mm-hmm.
And when the MCU kind of revitalized it, it kind of gave theaters this time to release these big budget movies when everyone's expecting them. But that takes us to the cons of the MCU. They forgot about summer blockbusters and just decided they could release these movies at any time. And it kind of overshadowed so many movies that came out because everyone's going to there. But the MCU also really revitalized theaters in general.
Yeah.
Like, theaters could remain open because so many people were going to these movies all of the time.
Yeah, and like that's where, I think that the MCU is great from the perspective of you need to have blockbusters, otherwise film's not going to survive. You need to have blockbusters. You do. I think where it's bad is that the studios and everything got so complacent. There was no originality anymore. It was, we can guarantee that this is going to come out, so we'll just have it come out. And unless your name is Christopher Nolan, nobody's going to make a blockbuster anybody's going to give a crap about. And that was really the biggest downfall when it came to this whole cinematic universe. The film industry would be alive without the MCU. I think right now we're seeing the repercussions of how successful the MCU was. I think we're officially at a point where the MCU got so big that now we're starting to see the backlash when people don't like MCU movies anymore, or when they're tired of them, or when they don't want it coming anymore. That is what the issue is. You've lost a lot of independent film. We're finally starting to get it back. It seems like people are starting ready to make more moves. I also think though that it took a lot of creativity. And I think ultimately it ruined a lot of classic stories. These comic books are classic. And I think none of them are going to end on high notes. I think it's just at the point where it's just going to be run into the ground and it's going to die when it dies. And that's all there is to it. And so in terms of the MCU, like, yeah, it's great because it made a bunch of people a lot of money and it really showed the power of a blockbuster and like, you know, that helped. But people became too reliant on it. And there's just nothing there. There's no depth to it, no matter how much you want to try to convince yourself there is.
I think we're kind of finally at a point where, because of the MCU kind of collapsing or like petering off, whatever you want to call it at this point, when the MCU was at its height, people were signing 6, 7, 9 movie deals. And if you look at some of these MCU actors, Elizabeth Olsen's talked about, don't do it. Don't sign multi-movie deals because it locks you in too long and you don't get to do anything else. It kind of feels like, maybe I'm getting too Canadian with this, but it feels a lot like when the NHL finally like introduced the salary cap and you started seeing people kind of like circumventing the net cap by making these long, like 12, 15-year deals. And then they had to shorten how long those deals could be because of like the repercussions of what that was doing to not only players, but teams and revenues and stuff. I think we're at a point where what the MCU accomplished over the last 15 years is quite impressive. And it's provided an opportunity for filmmakers, actors, and even studios to really learn the furthest extent of how far we can pull something like this.
Yeah, and then the second question he asked was, how will the MCU be remembered in years to come? Its legacy. This one I can answer pretty quickly. I think over the next 10 years, it'll be fine. I think people will start to get tired of it. They'll look back. They'll say, oh, I miss Iron Man. I miss this. I miss that. I think in 20 years, when John and I are old men still doing this podcast, I think that is when people will look back and say, those weren't actually that good. And I think we see that a lot. Like, they're not timeless. That's the biggest issue.
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of movies are timeless. A movie like Alien is timeless because it's using real sets and the face hugger. I don't know what the hell they did, but it worked. These movies aren't timeless. And so I think that it'll be remembered fondly by people who love the movies. I think there's always going to be a market for Marvel, but this is not going to be it's going to be remembered as an oversaturated thing that started good and was eventually ruined. And then people are going to say, well, just go watch the first 3 phases. And a lot of people are going to watch the first 3 phases and say, it's not that good either.
Yeah. Just think of it this way. Like, how many summer blockbusters do we actually talk about 20 years later? Yeah. Right? Like, it doesn't happen that often. We're at a point now where Marvel has become Friday the 13th with how many movies they're turning out, right? The fact that we haven't had a direct-to-streaming Marvel movie yet is just Disney holding on. I guess we did. I guess Black Widow kind of went direct-to-streaming.
Because it really had to.
Yeah, because of like circumstances and stuff. But because we haven't had one like specifically made for streaming outside of the TV shows, like that's the moment where you know the MCU is no longer tenable, and that's the moment where people are going to they'll change their mind about how they feel about the beginning of it, not just the end of it.
People have a hard time understanding when they're living through something that it will be viewed more negatively or more positively in the future, no matter what.
Yeah.
Citizen Kane wasn't loved in 1941, and yet now it is considered the greatest or one of the greatest movies of all time. And I always say that, you know, it's the same thing as like why I try not to talk about movies of like the time that they were made, because if you go back and you watch a movie from 1994, it was a different time than 2024 is. And we can sit here and we can say, oh, well, we're better now. But in 30 years, people are going to look at us and say, you guys were idiots. Like that's just how it is. Like, I hate to be like that.
Yep.
I don't want to make you all feel like everything is worthless, because it's not. But there is a lot to be said for every generation looks at past generations and says, man, they did that. Man, they did that. I mean, something like Disney World. is looked at
Mhm.
negatively by so many people in our generation and the generation below us because of how capitalist it is and things like that.
Yeah.
That is something like it doesn't matter what you make. It doesn't matter what the intention is. It doesn't matter what you do. Future generations are going to look back and say, man, that's not as good. They didn't say what they thought. And I
Mhm.
think people who live through it have a hard time with that. They don't understand. We can't know because we're not 30 years from now.
Yeah. How hard is it to convince people to watch movies that are pre-80s now?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's inevitably going to happen to these MCU movies. Is
Yep.
they are going to be so far in the past, people aren't going to revisit them just on principle and not on
Yeah.
whether or not they enjoy them.
Yeah. I mean, we rewatched the Terminator for our Patreon podcast, and like it's 80s, man. Like it's so
Yeah.
80s. And like I get it, but if I had a kid and I showed him that movie in 15 years, would he like it? I don't know. By that point, it's
Yeah,
55
you
years old.
know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And then the last question from Jason was, what movies do you overall enjoy, want to own, and go back to? I would never own any of the MCU movies. My wife does actually own quite a bit, and I let them in our house. But the Captain America movies are the only ones that I honestly would like revisit over and over again. That's really it. Like I don't know if I'd rewatch any of these movies again other than the Captain Americas and maybe the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. That's really it.
I own all the first 3 phases of the MCU already. That was part. I was part of the. Remember when the Disney had like the Disney Movie Club?
Yeah.
Like every month you got a movie.
Yep.
There was a lot of MCU movies for a long time on that in
Not
that
shocking.
program. Yeah, but so I own a lot of them. I don't know if I've ever put one into my Blu-ray player to watch though.
Yeah, and that's the other problem is now with Disney Plus, we don't need to put them into the Blu-ray player.
Yeah.
You know, so
I
it's like
haven't put them in the Blu-ray player for this podcast yet because I just use Disney Plus instead.
Yeah, because Disney Plus just has it all. So what's the point?
Yeah. Except for the Spider-Man movie. Do they have the Spider-Man movie down there? Because they didn't have it up here. It's still on Netflix up here.
No, we have everything down here. Disney has the rights to everything down here.
Interesting.
Yeah, you can't do any Disney has all their stuff down here.
Okay.
The only thing that Disney doesn't have is the theme park. They can't make Universal get rid of their theme park.
Oh, like Hulk and like the rise.
Yeah, they have the Hulk and the Amazing Spider-Man and all that stuff. They can't make them get rid of that. That's the only thing that Disney doesn't have. But in terms of movies, they have everything. So,
but yeah, I don't know. I think the MCU is going to be a fascinating thing to look back on 30 years from now.
Totally agree. I do agree. But if I don't go to bed, I'm going to be in trouble. So I'm out. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Jason Obermeyer, thanks guys for the great journey. Get ready for phase 4 and 5 where the MCU becomes the DCEU. Phil, you think it's rough? Get ready. I'm ready to go. Hey, we're in the home stretch. Like I compared it to running when I used to train for 5Ks and 10Ks and things like that. If you had a day where you had to run 6 repeat miles, the first one was always the hardest one. You're the most ready and everything, but you realize, man, I still have 5 more. By the time you get to the 4th one, you're so exhausted. You're just like, I've already done it 3 times. I can do it 3 more. That's how I feel right now. I only got to do it 11 more times or whatever it is. It might not be fun, but it'll be done.
Good conversation.
Yeah. But thank you all so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Next week, as we said, we're going to do The Killer from Netflix because we put it off long enough. So we won't start with the 2024 movie. Our first 2024 movie will be Mean Girls, the musical. There's no way we're not going to watch that, especially since we put out the Patreon episode. And we'll be doing Black Widow. Consider becoming a patron, patreon.com/The Specialist. We're putting out a whole bunch of the movie content. It'll be once a week, every Tuesday. Every single Tuesday, there will be a new episode. There's not many Patreons on the internet where you're going to get an episode every week. So if you enjoy hearing us talk, if you think it's fun, we're going to talk about just bigger movies. Like we're trying to talk about like movies that are relevant, that you've heard of, that you want to see. And if you haven't seen, you probably should see. So consider becoming a patron. You'd also get access to the Q&A and the Discord. And thank you all so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed yourselves, and we will see you next week. What? It won't end. It's saying I'm logged out. John, end it.
Bye, everyone.